Hi and welcome to the Soteki podcast by the students, for the students and staff of SAMC, part of the Study Well project. In this episode, we'll look at the subject of motivation. What is motivation? How does our behavior affect it? What does it mean? How does it work? And are there ways or tips on how to keep ourselves motivated? My name is Drew, and joining us on the podcast today is Kati Karinharju. Kati is a senior lecturer here in SAMC, a fitness instructor, health and wellbeing coach, and is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Queensland, Australia. Her PhD is on promoting physical activity, so she's definitely the ideal person for this. Welcome to the podcast, Kati. Before we get stuck right into it, if you could please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to this podcast. I'm really excited.
No worries.
Yes, and let's have a look how much time do we have this, because this is my favorite topic of all. So just shortly, my background with physical activity and instructing physical activity goes almost 30 years from here. So
Wow, fantastic.
I think 26 or something like that. So I was quite young when I started to instruct, and physical activity has always been the number one for me.
Right.
But it doesn't mean that I've always been really motivated to be physically active, but I just love to share the physical activity with people and also motivate them. And what I love the most is to see the sparkle in people's eyes when they succeed or they manage to catch the motivation.
Great.
So that's why I enjoy my work as a teacher, but also as an instructor.
Fantastic. All right, folks, I hope you got your seatbelt on and you're ready to listen to this podcast. So we'll start off with, Kati, with what is motivation? What is motivation?
Well, I'm not going to use like a dictionary. I'm just thinking myself, what's the motivation? And I think it's a force that drives us to do whatever we are intended to do. And sometimes we have a very high motivation and sometimes we don't have motivation. But what's the motivation? It can be many things. And there are so many things that motivates for me or motivates any person to do things. So the matter is to find what motivates us and also to be able to use the sources that motivates us. And so maybe some like self-reflection and that what we are intended to do and also what motivates us to do it. It can be something simple as music, or so for some reason usually it's health which motivates us to do like physical activity or health related things, or it can be, I don't know, any goals we want to achieve. So it's just it can be something which is driven by outside of us, or it can be something the force that comes from inside of us. And sometimes we don't even know what's the motivation. So you're just excited to do something, but you're not always aware of the motivation behind it. But if we talk about health behavioral, it would be good to a little bit explore and think what motivates me. And sometimes you can fool yourself to be motivated when your brains are saying, I don't want to do this, and then you trick yourself to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when we look at the current situation we're in, the climate with the pandemic, I think there's been a lot of emphasis on the challenges that not only students but perhaps the staff as well. Yes, they are humans, and they are also exposed to the same elements that we as students are exposed to. And I guess because of these challenges, and unexpected, of course, we find ourselves in a position where perhaps we need to look at our well-being, address that, and be motivated to make those decisions that actually keep us going, keeps the clock ticking, and keeps us enjoying what we enjoyed before having all these obstacles. So if I was to ask you then, just how does it work? I mean, for an everyday student coming to SAMC and trying to keep your head above the clouds and keep on top of your schoolwork, and at the same time trying to be healthy, eat healthy, live healthy, how does it all work? I mean, is there a formula, or is there something that we can employ?
Yeah, well, it was interesting when you mentioned that, pandemic and then like students and staff members. And I was thinking right away, what's my favorite group is also people with disabilities. So actually, it doesn't matter what's your background. We still have the same kind of things, what motivates it. It's not about what's your background, it's more your personality thing. And one thing is also the knowledge. So that actually divides us maybe to the different groups. So it's like cognitive behavioral. So more you know about, like, everybody has heard that you should eat vegetables, or you should sleep this much, or you should stretch.
Right,
but how many of us is actually following that instruction?
Right, yeah.
So knowledge is important, that we know that this is good for our health. We need evidence-based theory to support the knowledge. But then what drives us to actually follow that is that we need a little bit more things that will give us some kind of hints or ideas that and reinforce our behavioral. And if I'm talking about, when I mention people with disabilities, when I've been working lots with, for example, people with spinal cord injury, it's sometimes people get stuck by the disability. But actually, they have exactly the same personality or same motivational sources. Someone motivates from the looks, or from they want to be achieving, like, for example, Paralympic, they want to goals, like they want to be top athletic, or someone wants us to be healthy, or someone enjoys the music. And it doesn't matter if you're on seated position or standing. So that's, again, that there are different sources, and when you're a student or you're a staff member, it's also the same thing, just to maybe you need to go back to your values of your life. And that's one first thing, if you think about behavioral tools and motivation. If you try to motivate someone with some kind of a trick which is not related to their life or their everyday life, they don't match. And it's impossible. You can be motivated for a little while. For example, let's say we want to start a run with you, Drew, and we want to run 5 kilometers for 25 minutes. And we say in 2 months we're going to do this, and the one who wins will get $20. Let's say it like that. So that motivates us. I want to get that money. I want to beat you. Well, I can do that 2 months, but if after that stops, what happens then?
Yep.
So if during that 2 months nothing changes in my life, like I don't see any physical changes, or I don't see that it fits to my life, I will drop it, and then it will. Yeah. So first of all, one thing is that it needs to be some way related to your everyday life and your values. So you asked me, this was a really long answer,
That's
but
great.
you asked me that if there is some kind of a formula or something, I would say first thing is to sit down and think about, like, what do I want to achieve in my life? And you don't have to go like really long goals. Just think about, okay, friends are important to me. I have a dog. I have a family. Or I want to spend more time with my partner. I enjoy nature. And you list 5 things what you want to have in your life. Then the other thing is you list your typical day. And you have a look, do they match? If they don't, then you do things in your life which are actually not important for you. So then you need to find, for example, I'm talking about like physical activity or eating healthy. You will check, is that something that is actually a value for you? For example, some people want to be as independent as possible, like elderly people. Then you can say, well, being physically active makes you more independent, and you can remain independent. Then we can give a motivation to person to be physically active. So let's say for students, they obviously nowadays we sit too much, we are too sedentary every day. And so someone could think, so what? I can be more physically active when I'm older. But then if the person, for example, wants to be, they need to think they want to be more physically active, like meeting their friends, or they have some goals, what they want to achieve. Then we need to find a connection between the healthy lifestyle and their values. But if we can't find that connection, for example, that they have more energy during the day, not only to study, but maybe party, that could be some kind of a motivation.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Or even walking in heels. That's something. If you do exercising, you might be able to do and use your favorite shoes.
Yeah.
So whatever the motivation is, we need to find a connection with the value and.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's, you know, it really sounds interesting. I mean, it's in some, I guess, looking at it in some way here, I'm thinking that us as students and staff, of course, we have a certain amount of control if we only had that education in terms of knowing what we want to achieve and knowing our values and making that connection, basically making those decisions that push us in the right direction and in achieving, I guess, the results we want, whether that's being healthier, whether it's being smarter, being more active and things like that. Would that be a fair sort of a point of view from what I've got from you? Or?
Yeah, but I do think, but I also think that one thing, it's not only about the education, what comes from, you know, outside or someone offers you. You can actually start to think like help your own how to get motivated on different kind of things. And if I'm just thinking, it doesn't matter if you're a student or a staff member, I'm really aware how long the days can be, and when you're one day on a computer or on a lectures, you might be really tired. So how do I motivate myself is something that you can actually. Sometimes we don't stop to listen ourselves and talk, have a conversation with ourselves.
Very true.
Yeah, so that's something what would be like I said, I've been physically active my whole life, and I enjoy to get people physically active, but I have to fool myself and trick myself to do different, for example, like I mentioned earlier, that if I want to do a morning ride or go to the swim next day, I don't decide it that day I'm supposed to go. I do the decision one day or even couple of days before, and I get all my gears ready, because if you start to look the gears when you're a little bit hesitating or you're tired or you're hungry or something, you will have too many obstacles to start to do what you're aiming to do. But if you already pass those obstacles beforehand, you don't have any excuses, and sometimes I don't negotiate with myself. My friends are saying I'm too tired, but at the same time, one important. What I always say to my students, but also the people I coach, is that important thing is to recognize when you're tired or when you're lazy. They are two different things, but if you don't recognize that, you might get tricked by the laziness, and you think that, okay, I just don't go and do anything. But sometimes if you're tired, it's not a good thing to, for example, to do a training or physical activity. Then you should be resting. So that's something, again, if I'm talking about talking and getting a little bit aware of yourself and starting to think when, for example, about the motivation and behavioral change, there is this kind of a relapse prevention.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one really important thing about the motivation, that it doesn't matter when you do something, behavioral change, and you don't always succeed. That doesn't matter as long as you're aware why, because next time you can actually be prepared. So if you're not prepared to be failed, you actually, once you get, once you do your behavioral change or something and you're really succeed, and once you get the first failure, you actually now I can't do my whatever your activity or exercise was, and then you think that that's it. But if you're prepared that sometimes there comes situations that I can't do this, but I can get over it. I can have a one day off, or I don't always have to go to the gym, or I can sometimes have my whatever is, if you're on some kind of you want to avoid some food, for example, and then you're just, I really feel like eating it, and you need to be aware that it doesn't, the world doesn't end there, and you're able to move forward. So again, to your question, it is important, like there are things how, for example, university can motivate our students, and our staff members with different kind of, for example, I'll just mention Campus Move is one of the good things to motivate. Like you can see the signs everywhere, and you can, and they offer physical activity classes and fitness classes right after your day. So that those are like extrinsic motivational things to motivate people to make it easier for you to be physically active. But then there are also things that people need to think about themselves, that there always will be obstacles if we are not ready to face them and think about how do I.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, as you sort of clarifying some of the questions I had, I'm also thinking about those students, those of us that constantly find obstacles. And I've been thinking, how exactly do we tackle that when we get to that first point of failure? And then we think, okay, God, you know, is this the right thing to do? Am I doing the right thing? Or, you know, is there an easier way of doing it? And I know personally myself, I've been in that position. I'm pretty sure some of our listeners have also experienced that. So is there... I guess we have the campus move, yes, the extrinsic stuff, but is there something concrete that we as individuals, when we have these obstacles and we are not so motivated after that first point of failure, is there something that we could do that can help us get past or get over that obstacle?
Well, first of all, there needs to be small steps, like small goals. Like, first of all, even if we are aiming to something bigger, we always need some small steps that will show us that we managed to get these baby steps, like, you know, that first goal and the second. So if we have a goal, we need to divide it in smaller ones, like see what kind of, let's say we have some kind of aim or goal which is in the future, even in 6 months or 2 months. Is there a different steps that we can get to that one? So how can I know that I'm convinced myself? So some people need like measures for it, you know, like sometimes measuring different things can show us, like water bottle. You have a water bottle every day, you know that I have finished drinking my water bottle. So that's a measure that I have managed to increase my water drinking. Or same thing is what I'm saying. For example, I have done this mistake many times with myself, is that I decide that I start to do running. And then I think that or swimming or whatever, and I think that I have to do 60 minutes to be, that it's enough, you know? And if I don't feel like doing 60 minutes, I'm like, I'm not doing it at all. And why do I have to do the whole, like, do 5-kilometer run? Or why can't I just go and do 200 meters and see how I feel? I've been thinking this kind of like a new theory that we should launch, like, I don't know if I call it in English, like 15-minute motivation workout or something. So give yourself like because I've noticed that when you start to run or cycle or swim, the first 5 minutes you're like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't feel like doing it. But give yourself, like, don't listen your brains or your head. Give your body a time to show that I actually enjoy it. And after 15 minutes, you actually like, I might go a little bit further, or I can keep on going. Or if you feel like after 15 minutes, I don't want to do this, then you can stop. But give yourself a little bit time.
Yep.
But don't do too high goals. So I would say that just walking around the block, that's better than nothing. Like now you were talking earlier about the guidelines, physical activity guidelines or health guidelines. The latest guidelines are saying some is better than none. So we should start from
Makes
that.
sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Why do we are too demanding for ourselves with health behavioral? Some is better than none. So if you don't feel like doing 10-kilometer run, it doesn't mean you don't have to, or you have to do that one or nothing. Just do a 5-minute walk.
You know, Katja, I mean, there's some really good tips here, and I think for the listeners, I think it's all about breaking that bigger goal, the bigger picture up into small bits where we can achieve the small steps first, and then before you know it, you've achieved the bigger goal. So that sustainability from the first small baby step to the many steps taken to get to the final destination, I think is probably a good way of looking at keeping our motivation levels up where it's realistic and sustainable.
Yeah.
Great. Some really, really good tips there, and some really good information. I think that we all can take a page out of what you've said and apply that in our own personal lives. So, yeah, I think that'll bring us now to the end of our podcast. And perhaps we might invite Kati again for part 2. Of course, if she has
say party.
Yeah. So hopefully we get to see Kati again and continue this subject of motivation and how it works. So Kati, on behalf of Soteki Podcast, I'd like to say thank you for your time today.
Thank you.